In 1758, the southern plains of North America shook under the hooves of one of the most feared cavalry forces of the time, the Comanche. But surprisingly, this wasn't a battle against Spanish armies or European invaders. Instead, it was at first a brutal war against another native rival, the Apache. Why were the Comanche so determined to wipe out a tribe that had lived on these lands for generations instead of joining forces to fight foreign enemies? Was there a deeper reason why these two powerful native forces couldn't live in peace? Back in the late 1500s, the vast and fertile southern plains of what's now the U.S., stretching from Texas to Arizona, belonged to the Apache, masters of hunting and skilled farmers. They planted corn, squash, and beans along fertile rivers. With abundant food and massive territory, the Apache lived richer lives than most other tribes, ruling these lands with wisdom and the strength of fierce warriors. But not far away, the Comanche weren't so lucky. They were outcasts, pushed into harsh lands by stronger tribes, including the Apache. This tough life shaped the Comanche culture into one that was fierce and warlike. The world at that time belonged to the Apache, while the Comanche were just wanderers of the unforgiving plains. Then, everything changed. In the 1600s, the Spanish came from the south, bringing shiny swords, deadly guns, and most importantly, horses. As they expanded their territory, they forced many native tribes to convert to Christianity and work for the Spanish Empire. But the Apache refused to submit. The Apache raiders gained more than just victory over the Spanish. They seized valuable supplies, weapons, and, most importantly, horses. For the Apache, who were originally hunter-gatherers and foot warriors, the horse became a breakthrough. At first, they observed how the Spanish rode and cared for their horses. Over time, they mastered horseback riding, learning to use horses for hunting, traveling long distances, and launching swift raids. Horses gave them unmatched speed and mobility, turning them into some of the most skilled mounted warriors in the region. Meanwhile, the thousands of horses that fled north didn't just vanish. Many of them ran into the vast plains, where they were eventually captured by the Comanche and other neighboring tribes. The Comanche, in particular, quickly recognized the power of the horse. They not only learned to ride but became experts at breeding and trading horses, transforming themselves into one of the most dominant forces of the southern plains. The arrival of these horses would eventually shape the future of tribal warfare, trade networks, and hunting practices across the entire region. This was a new chapter of the Comanche. For the first time, they saw these powerful creatures. Horses, symbols of strength to the Spanish, were much more to the Comanche. To them, horses were weapons, treasures, and the key to dominating the vast plains. While other tribes used horses simply for travel, the Comanche made them a core part of their way of life. They didn't just tame horses, they bred the fastest, strongest, and most enduring ones. Comanche children learned to ride, hunt, and fight on horseback from a young age. They could shoot arrows with deadly precision even while riding at full speed and dodge enemy attacks with unmatched agility. This superior mobility gave the Comanche an unbeatable fighting style. They didn't build forts or stand in formation like European armies. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, striking swiftly and disappearing like the wind. Comanche war parties could travel hundreds of miles in just a few days, raiding settlements, stealing resources, capturing prisoners, and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. With their mastery of horses, the Comanche didn't just expand their territory, they spread fear across the frontier. No power, whether rival tribes, Mexican forces, or American settlers, could easily defeat them. For more than a century, they were the most feared horseback warriors on the North American plains. With this unmatched mobility, the Comanche began pushing south, invading Apache territories. The war dragged on for decades, filled with bloody battles and brutal raids. The Apache, who had mastered guerrilla warfare, were no match for the Comanche's speed and strength. The dawn of March 16, 1758, broke with a deceptive calm. The first rays of the Texas sun stretched lazily over the endless plains, painting the land in gold. Mission San Sabá, near present-day Menard, Texas, stood in quiet dignity. Its stone walls, rough but strong, seemed to promise protection. Spanish soldiers busied themselves, hammering and repairing tools. The rhythmic clang of metal echoed softly in the cool morning air. Inside the stone chapel, Father Alonso Geraldo de Toreros knelt in prayer. His voice, along with those of the other Franciscan priests, rose in hushed tones, asking for peace, guidance, and protection in this remote land. But beyond the horizon, a storm was coming, a storm made of dust, hooves, and vengeance. It began with a whisper in the wind, a faint tremble beneath the earth. At first, the soldiers thought it might be distant thunder or a herd of buffalo. But soon, they saw it, a line of dust, thin at first, then thicker, rising higher. The ground trembled louder. Thump thump, thump thump. The sound of hoofbeats rolled across the plains, steady and unrelenting, like a heartbeat growing faster. And then, they appeared. The Comanche came like shadows racing the wind. Their faces were streaked with war paint, vivid reds and deep blacks, designed to intimidate and confuse. Eagle feathers decorated their hair, fluttering wildly as they rode. The sun glinted off their weapons, spears, bows, and war clubs, flashing like lightning. Beside them rode their fierce allies, the Wichita and Hasinai warriors, each with their own battle cries, each ready for war. These warriors moved with deadly purpose. This was not a random raid. It was a real war. Hoo-ah! The war cry shattered the peaceful morning, echoing like thunder. In an instant, chaos exploded. Arrows darkened the sky, flying fast and deadly. They struck wooden walls, pierced roofs, and found their marks among panicked soldiers. The Spanish barely had time to react. Muskets fired back, but too slow. Reload times were no match for the speed of the Comanche warriors, who fired arrows with deadly precision while galloping at full speed. They knew every curve of the river, every patch of grass. They fought like the wind itself, fast, unpredictable, unstoppable. Set the fires. The Wichita and Hasinai warriors advanced with torches blazing. The dry thatched roofs of San Sabá caught fire almost instantly. Flames roared, devouring everything in their path. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, blotting out the rising sun. The smell of burning wood mixed with gunpowder and blood. Panic consumed the Spanish soldiers. They ran, tripping over one another, desperately trying to escape. But the Comanche riders cut them down with sweeping blows of spears and war clubs. Inside the chapel, Father Toreros clung to hope. He and two other priests huddled together, praying for divine intervention. The flames, however, did not care for prayers. The roof collapsed in a spray of burning debris. With the building falling around them, the priests fled outside, only to face the warriors. No mercy, no miracle. Father Alonso Geraldo de Toreros fell, his blood soaking the earth. It was a death that would be etched in history, the first Franciscan priest killed in the region. A wound to Spanish pride that would not soon heal. By noon, San Sabá was turned to ashes. The chapel, once a symbol of Spanish faith and ambition, was now a blackened ruin. Its stone walls, scorched and broken, stood like bones against the Texas sky. The wooden cross that had crowned the chapel lay charred and splintered on the ground. And yet, despite their victory, the Comanche did not stay. They did not claim the land. They came to take their own territory. With that silent message carved into the ashes, the Comanche and their allies vanished into the horizon. As quickly as they had come, the attack on Mission San Sabá was more than a battle, it was a declaration of dominance. A year earlier, the Apache had sought Spanish protection from the Comanche. The Spanish, eager to extend their power into northern territories, built the San Sabá mission in 1757, hoping to convert the Apache and control the region. To the Comanches, San Sabá wasn't a religious center, it was a military outpost of their enemies. An alliance between the Spanish and Apache would threaten Comanche control over Texas. So, they decided to attack first. And with this blazing assault, they made their intentions clear. The Spanish would never forget the speed, the ferocity, and the tactical brilliance of the Comanche. The mission lay in ruins. The priests lay dead, and the message was burned into the land itself. This is our land and we are the king here. From that day forward, the Comanche continued to ride, fierce, free, and feared, across the southern plains of Texas. Untouched and untamed beneath the wide, open sky, the attack shocked the Spanish government in the New World. A year later, they launched a massive revenge campaign with over 600 soldiers and hundreds of native allies, marching deep into Comanche lands. But they found only empty plains, no sign of the Comanche. When they finally spotted a small Comanche war party, the warriors simply smiled and disappeared into the wilderness, leaving only shadows behind. The Spanish never found a Comanche village to attack. They realized they couldn't fight an enemy that seemed invisible on the vast plains. After this failure, Spain no longer dared challenge Comanche power. They gradually withdrew from the southern plains, leaving the Lipan Apache isolated and doomed. Without Spanish protection, the Apache were hunted down and pushed into remote, barren mountains where they eventually weakened. Meanwhile, the Comanche rose to become the undisputed rulers of the Great Plains, dominating the region for more than a century. They didn't just win a battle, they ruled an era. In conclusion, the reason the Comanche attacked the Apache before confronting the Spanish stemmed from a strategy of survival and a desire to dominate the southern plains. To the Comanche, the Apache were not only traditional rivals but also the greatest obstacle to controlling the region's rich resources. When the Apache sought protection from the Spanish, this threat became even more serious. To avoid facing a powerful alliance between the Apache and the Spanish, the Comanche had to strike first. The war against the Apache not only eliminated their biggest rival but also cemented their dominance over the plains, paving the way for more than a century of rule marked by power and fear that no force dared to challenge. If the Comanche and Apache had cooperated, how would the history of South America have been different?